The autumn air was crisp in Washington, D.C., as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the White House lawn. Tourists bustled about, their voices mixing with the rustling leaves and distant honks from the streets. Among them was a little girl named Emily Carter, an 8-year-old from Ohio who clutched her father's hand tightly. Emily wasn't like most kids her age. While other children her age were busy playing with dolls and video games, Emily spent much of her time wondering about life's deeper questions. She was an old soul in a young body, thoughtful, observant, and unafraid to ask difficult questions. Her family had come to D.C. for a vacation, and the highlight of the trip was a tour of the White House. Emily had read about presidents and their families, but there was one person in particular who intrigued her, Barron Trump. He was the youngest member of a family that had once lived in the White House, and from what little she had read, he seemed to be a quiet, mysterious figure. As fate would have it, just as the tour was ending and the Carters were exiting toward the street, Emily spotted a tall, young man walking in their direction. Her heart leaped. She recognized him immediately, Barron Trump. He had grown taller than she expected, nearly towering over most adults. Dressed in a casual hoodie and jeans, he had an air of quiet confidence, but his eyes held a deep introspection that made Emily believe he understood things others didn't. Her father, engrossed in a conversation with a tour guide, didn't notice as Emily slowly let go of his hand and stepped forward. "Excuse me," she called out, her tiny voice carrying through the cool air. Barron slowed his steps and turned, his brow slightly raised. At first, he hesitated. It wasn't unusual for strangers to recognize him, though he generally kept a low profile. But something about the little girl standing before him made him pause. "Yes," he said, his voice calm but curious. Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 100 times, though she never truly believed she would get the chance. "Do you believe in God?" she asked. Barron's expression changed. It wasn't annoyance or discomfort. It was something else, a flicker of surprise, followed by a thoughtful silence. People usually asked him about his family, his father's presidency, or his life in the spotlight. But this was different. A few tourists nearby turned their heads, curious about the unusual conversation unfolding. Emily stood firm, her big brown eyes locked onto his. Finally, Barron sighed softly and crouched down slightly to meet her eye level. "Why do you ask?" he said, his voice softer now. Emily hesitated before answering. "Because I don't know if he's real. My mommy, she's really sick. She says she prays to God every night, but she's not getting better. If God is real, why doesn't he help her?" The question hung in the air like a weight neither of them could see. The murmurs of tourists, the distant honking of cars. It all faded into the background. Barron's gaze softened. He wasn't sure what to say yet, but he knew this moment was bigger than just an answer. "Come, sit with me," he finally said, gesturing toward a nearby bench. Emily blinked, surprised but relieved. She followed him, her small legs moving quickly to match his long strides. She didn't know it yet, but the words Barron Trump was about to speak would change her life forever. Barron and Emily sat down on the stone bench beneath a large oak tree. The sounds of the city still hummed in the distance, but in that moment, it felt as if they had stepped into their own quiet world. One where a little girl's heart was heavy with questions, and a young man was about to give her an answer she'd never forget. Barron folded his hands together, staring at them for a moment before looking at Emily. Her innocent eyes were searching his, waiting. "I don't think there's an easy answer to your question," Barron admitted. "But I do believe in God." Emily's lips trembled. "Then why isn't he helping my mommy?" Barron took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. "You said your mom prays every night. Does she ever tell you what she prays for?" Emily nodded. "She asks God to make her better. And she says she prays for me too, that I won't be sad or scared." Barron smiled gently. "That's love." Emily looked confused. "What do you mean?" He leaned back against the bench, looking up at the sky as if drawing strength from the heavens themselves. "Sometimes we think God is supposed to give us what we ask for, like a magic wish. But God isn't a genie. He doesn't just take away all the hard things in life. He walks through them with us. Emily's small fingers fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. But if he's there, why doesn't he stop bad things from happening? Barron exhaled slowly, nodding as if he had wrestled with the same question before. I used to wonder that, too. The truth is, we live in a world where pain exists. People get sick. People get hurt. But do you know what my mother once told me? Emily shook her head. She said, Barron, faith isn't about living a life without struggles. It's about knowing that when the storms come, you're not alone. Emily's eyes widened. Even if we can't see him? Barron nodded. Especially then. She was quiet for a long time, her little mind absorbing his words. The streetlights flickered on in the distance, casting a warm glow over them. My mommy says that even if she doesn't get better, she knows she'll be okay. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper now. She says God is with her no matter what. Barron reached out and gently placed a hand over hers. That's faith, Emily, and that's strength. Even when things don't go the way we want, it doesn't mean God isn't listening. It means he's helping in ways we don't always understand. Emily swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with tears. So, you think he's still listening to me? Barron smiled, a rare but genuine warmth in his expression. I know he is. A single tear slipped down Emily's cheek. She quickly wiped it away, but the weight on her chest felt lighter, as if something inside her had shifted. She had come here seeking an answer, but she had found something even more powerful, hope, and she would carry that with her no matter what came next. Emily sat in silence, Barron's words swirling in her mind like autumn leaves caught in the wind. She had expected a simple answer. Either yes, God was real and would help her mother, or no, he wasn't. But what she had received was something much deeper. Barron wasn't like the people at church who just told her to have faith, without explaining why. He didn't brush off her fears or pretend to know everything. Instead, he made her feel like her doubts were okay. Like asking questions didn't mean she had no faith. It meant she was searching for it. She wiped another tear from her cheek and sniffled. You talk like you've been through something hard before. Barron exhaled, his gaze distant for a moment. I think everyone faces challenges, no matter who they are. Emily tilted her head. Even you. Barron chuckled softly, his fingers tapping on the bench. Especially me. She had always imagined the children of famous people lived perfect lives. No worries, no sadness. But now, looking at Barron's face, she realized that wasn't true at all. People have a lot of opinions about my family, he continued, his voice measured. They assume they know everything about me just because of who my father is. When I was younger, I used to wonder why God put me in this life, why I had to deal with the things I did. The cameras, the criticism, the pressure. It wasn't easy. Emily's brow furrowed. That sounds really hard. He nodded. It was. But that's when I started asking questions just like you. I wanted to know if God was real, if he had a plan, or if everything was just random. Emily leaned forward. And what did you find out? Barron looked up at the sky for a moment before answering. I realized that sometimes God doesn't change our circumstances. He changes us through them. Emily thought about that. Like, my mom getting sick made me ask about God? Exactly, Barron said. And maybe, through this, you'll find a faith stronger than you ever had before. She bit her lip, looking down at her hands. I don't want to lose her. Barron's expression turned serious. I know, and I hope she gets better. But no matter what happens, Emily, love never disappears. Your mom loves you, you love her, and God loves you both. That's something that can't be taken away, not even by sickness. Emily's chest tightened, but this time, it wasn't just sadness. It was something else, something comforting. She thought back to the nights she had laid awake, listening to her mother's weak but steady voice whispering prayers in the dark. Maybe those prayers weren't just asking for healing. Maybe they were her mother's way of showing her faith, no matter what came next. Emily took a shaky breath. Do you really think God is with us? Even now? Barron smiled, his blue eyes calm and steady. I don't just think it, Emily. I know it. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt something deep inside her that she hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Emily sat quietly beside Barron, feeling something shift inside her. The fear that had been weighing her down for weeks didn't feel as heavy anymore. It was still there, but something else had joined it, hope. She looked up at Barron, studying his face. He wasn't much older than the kids she saw at school, yet he spoke like someone who had seen the world in a way most people hadn't. He didn't talk down to her or brush off her worries. Instead, he treated her like she mattered, like her questions were important. Can I ask you one more thing? Emily said hesitantly. Barron smiled. Of course. She took a deep breath, her small hands clenched together. If God is real and he loves us, does that mean we'll see the people we lose again? Barron's face softened. He knew this question wasn't just curiosity. It was the question. The one she had been too afraid to ask before. He thought carefully before answering. I believe we do. Emily's eyes flickered with something. Was it relief? Hope? Barron continued, his voice steady. You see, love isn't something that just disappears. It's bigger than time, bigger than life and death. I believe God made us with souls, and souls don't end. They go on. Emily wiped at her eyes again, nodding. So, even if my mom, her voice cracked, but she pushed forward. Even if she doesn't get better, she won't really be gone? Barron reached out and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. No, Emily, she won't. She'll always be with you. In your heart, in the things she's taught you, and one day, when it's your time, you'll see her again. The little girl's shoulders shook slightly, and a few silent tears rolled down her cheeks. But these tears weren't just from sadness. They carried something else. Comfort. Understanding. She had been so afraid of what might happen that she hadn't stopped to think about what would never change. Her mother's love, the memories they had, and the hope that, in some way, they would always be connected. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The evening had settled in fully now, the sky a deep shade of blue with the first stars beginning to twinkle above. People passed by, some glancing curiously at the unusual sight of the former first son speaking with a small girl. But the two of them were in their own world. Finally, Emily took a deep breath and straightened her back. Thank you, Barron. He smiled warmly. Anytime. She hesitated before adding, I think I believe now. Barron's smile widened. That's the beautiful thing about faith, Emily. It's not about having all the answers. It's about trusting even when you don't. She nodded, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't alone in her fears. And just like that, the weight she had been carrying didn't seem so heavy anymore. The city lights glowed softly as Emily sat beside Barron, feeling the warmth of his words settle into her heart. The once overwhelming fear had loosened its grip, replaced by something she hadn't expected, peace. Her father, who had been busy chatting with the tour guide, finally noticed her absence. When he turned around and saw Emily sitting on the bench next to Barron Trump, his eyes widened in shock. He hurried over. Emily, I've been looking for you, he said, out of breath. Then, his gaze shifted to Barron, realization dawning on him. Oh, Mr. Trump, I didn't realize. Barron stood, offering a polite nod. No problem, sir. Emily and I were just talking. Emily looked up at her dad, her face still streaked with dried tears but carrying a newfound calmness. Dad, Barron helped me. Her father furrowed his brow. Helped you? Emily turned back to Barron, and for a brief moment, their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. I had questions, she said simply, and he helped me find the answers. Her father looked at Barron with a mix of gratitude and admiration. Well, thank you. Emily's been struggling a lot lately. Her mom. He swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. Her mom's sick. We don't know how much time she has left. Barron nodded, his expression compassionate. She told me. Emily squeezed her father's hand. But it's okay, Dad. Her father blinked. It is. Emily nodded. I mean, it's not okay that Mom is sick. But I'm not as scared anymore. Barron told me that even if we can't see God, He's still with us. and that love doesn't end, even if someone goes away. Her father's throat tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. Barron placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "You're strong, Emily. More than you realize." Emily looked up at him, her heart swelling with something new. Not just faith, but gratitude. "I'll pray for you and your family," Barron said. "And I know God is listening." Emily beamed, a few final tears slipping down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't from sadness. They were from hope. "Thank you, Barron," she whispered. He gave her a final smile before nodding at her father and stepping back. "Take care, Emily." As he turned to leave, Emily watched him go, knowing she would never forget this moment. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel so lost. For the first time in weeks, she felt light again. And as she walked away with her father, she whispered a small prayer. Not for a miracle, but for the strength to believe, just as Barron had said. Because now she knew God had been with her all along.